thought it would be good to start this Guide to Surviving the Internet episode by addressing the elephant in the room. I'll be honest, the anger that I displayed in my previous episode on Mr. Enter was misplaced to say the least. You know, even though that particular video is by far the most popular episode in the series so far with over 1,000 views, it had quite a lot of dislikes, and I received a lot of criticism for it. And I'll be honest, even though that I do have issues with the mysterious Mr. Enter, and I do have legitimate grievances, I didn't express them in the best way, and it made me seem overtly angry, almost like I hated the guy, even though that I didn't. And if I offended anybody by doing that, then I am truly sorry, because that was not my intention. My intention was just to inform and entertain. And I'll be honest, it is hard to see your own work get criticized because you're so intrinsically dedicated to it and so close to it that it can be hard for anybody to say anything bad about it. It can really bum you out. And it was hard to hear all of the criticism that people displayed on me because of that video, but overtly I did address it, and I did realize that that particular part where I kind of just went off topic and just, I guess you could say, hated on people that didn't necessarily deserve it, that was misplaced. And when I tried to justify it, it did make me come off as a bit defensive. It made me seem like a dick. And again, I am truly sorry for that. That was not my intention. And I realized that I could have done a lot better in that particular video. And even though criticism is hard, it can be hard for anyone to deal with, I understand that it is very important, and I understand that it's intrinsically important to the growth of a content creator, because without criticism, how can we ever improve? And I just want to apologize, and to anyone that I offended, most notably Guy34 and JohnWalker123, I am sorry. My anger was completely misplaced. It was out of line. I realized that I was wrong for expressing my opinion in the way that I did, and that it could have been a lot better, you know. And again, there was just some stuff going on in my personal life that made me very angry, and I let that anger seep into the video, and it kind of killed any sort of potential that it could have had from being good. It stopped it from being as good as it could have been, is really what I'm trying to say. And I could go on forever about it, but I think you get the point, you know. So going forward, you know, I want to have a bit more of a critical, analytical approach to it instead of just going all out in terms of anger, because that's really not what the series is about, and that's not what you've come to accept from the series. So yeah, I just wanted to put that out there. So I think I've rambled on long enough, so let's just get to the video in question. Take it away, librarian voiceover man. Mr. Enter has attracted a lot of enemies over the years because of his opinions on animation, so much so that he created a series on his DeviantArt page titled Feeding the Trolls. Now I know what you're all thinking. Oh, Mr. Enter's just ripping off Cute Fuzzy Weasel? Cute Fuzzy Weasel also has a series titled Feeding the Trolls. And I want to make it abundantly clear that that is not the case. It's just purely coincidental that both Mr. Enter and Cute Fuzzy Weasel have a series titled Feeding the Trolls. Other than the titles, they're both completely different. Whereas Cute Fuzzy Weasel uses the name to go after people who legitimately deserve to be called out, Mr. Enter uses it to go after people that he simply doesn't like. Most notably, a user by the name of Shota, who resided on the site tvtropes.org, which is a website dedicated to reviewing popular figures in internet pop culture. After a particularly scathing review that got under Mr. Enter's skin, he wrote an entry of Feeding the Trolls solely dedicated to Shota, where he derided him as a troll. And so, his fans went to the TV Tropes article and basically lambasted the guy and attacked him and harassed him and labeled him as a troll, despite the fact that he had legitimate and honest criticism and that he simply didn't like Mr. Enter's video. It led Shota to be driven off of TV Tropes entirely. Don't believe me? This is how Shota responded when the whole shitstorm went down. Well, I found him out. Mr. Enter was so hurt about the comments I made here about him in this very reply section. Last month, he very maturely and professionally wrote a DeviantArt journal entry targeting only me, and resulted in almost 200 deviants giving me the inexcusable troll label, when he could have chosen tons of other comments here that were just as flaming. I can see where he gets all his support from now. How adult of him. I am never using this account again. Goodbye, everyone. I believe Mr. Enter acts this way because he's so intrinsically close to his work that he can't imagine anyone saying anything bad about it. Instead of viewing criticism as a tool that can help make his videos better, he treats it as an insult. He treats it as a personal attack against him, when in all actuality it's just honest, constructive criticism. And his ego has been so inflated that when someone says something bad about his work, he feels the need to lash out at those people who he perceives to be insulting him, because he's so close to his work and he holds it in such high regard that his ego gets bruised whenever someone says, this video wasn't very good. And we as content creators all have egos to some extent. We're all very close to our work, so when someone criticizes it or someone says something bad about it, our egos get bruised. We sometimes get defensive. It's a natural response, so I can understand why he acts in the way that he does, at least to a certain extent. Now don't get me wrong, it doesn't excuse or justify his actions, but it does give greater context into why he acts this way. Anyways, moving on. In his infamous, or, well, fairly odd pet review, he depicted a Nickelodeon executive as a... well, just watch the clip and you'll know what I'm talking about.
Now in The Fairly Odd Parents, where a careless pet owner thinks that salt is a good idea for a snail, and the writers think that putting them in mortal danger or killing them is funny. Do you have any insight on this?
Oh, what do you care about? All they do is crawl around, spread slime everywhere, bring home finger paint art, shouting, "Daddy, Daddy, why don't you play with me?" Well, maybe Daddy wants to be alone and bathe in his money bath! Now why don't you go play with your wooden bat? But Daddy, it's all broken and... Then don't get a splinter. Ha 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 ha. Sorry, I was just caught up in my thoughts. What did you want?
Why do you think it's funny killing snails with salt? But now I can see that you have other problems, so I'm just gonna leave you.
Whatever, asshole.
Mr. Enter believes that Nickelodeon is trying to poison the mind of today's youth by airing what he considers to be absolute filth. For example, the modern-day incarnation of Fairly Odd Parents, the modern-day incarnation of SpongeBob SquarePants, and of course everyone's favorite whipping boy, Breadwinners. And the argument that he's trying to make is that by Nickelodeon continuing to air these shows, which he believes are ruining and tainting the minds of today's youth, that they're no better than parents that abuse their kids. Now, I understand the sentiment he's trying to make, and it's even admirable to a certain extent, but the problem is that the joke was just in really poor taste. It just doesn't really work, and it could have been told a lot better. You see, Mr. Enter's not a very funny person, he's more of a serious and analytical one. So whenever he tries to be funny, it usually just falls flat on its face, because he just doesn't know how to construct a joke and then make it funny. And to equate television executives to abusive parents because they aired a certain episode or aired a certain show that you didn't like, that's kind of going way too far. And the joke that's saying that, oh, Nickelodeon executives are abusive parents, it doesn't exactly work. It's kind of cringeworthy, and again, it's done in pretty poor taste, even though I understand the sentiment behind it, and I understand that he was trying to make a point. Unfortunately, it just doesn't quite work. But hey, what do I know? I understand that humor is subjective, and while I personally didn't find it funny, there's probably a lot of people out there that found it absolutely hilarious. It really just depends on what your sense of humor is. If you like a lighter sense of humor, then you probably aren't gonna like that joke. But if you have a darker sense of humor, or you just really don't like the crap that Nickelodeon puts out, the so-called crap that Nickelodeon puts out, then you'll probably like the joke. It really just depends. There are people who love the mysterious Mr. Enter and worship the very ground that he stands on. There are also people who hate him with a burning passion. Those two such people are Kablam Bandicoot 64 and Clay Claymore. Now, I don't want to drag this on too long, so I'm just going to go through it very quickly. Both of them cannot accept criticism, both of them have gigantic egos, both of them label all of their detractors as trolls, Both of them nitpick over stupid and insignificant things, and finally, both of them are fueled by rage and hatred. I'm surprised these three haven't come together to create a giant ego-sized robot. I mean, that would be Transformers on steroids. Or maybe they should just spoon each other until they kiss and make up, whichever one comes first. Seriously, Kablam and Clay Claymore's blind and obsessive hatred of Mr. Enter is just as weird and uncomfortable as Mr. Enter's blind hatred for Seth MacFarlane and SpongeBob. But in all seriousness, the mysterious Mr. Enter is quite a polarizing figure on the internet. Whether you love him or hate him, he's managed to make quite a name for himself in the animation community and really in the YouTube community as a whole. And considering all the videos people have made on him should serve a testament to his famous legacy, or infamous legacy depending on how you look at it. Now I'm pretty sure you're wondering, is this just a regular guy that loves to review cartoons on the internet, or is he just an overinflated, self-entitled egotist that takes cartoons way too seriously? And I can't say if either one is the case. That's up for you, the people, to decide. Now before we wrap this video up, there's still one more matter that I need to attend to. Since someone on my last video on Mr. Enter requested that I talk about growing around, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to talk about growing around. Now, if you don't know what growing around is, it was an animated series that the mysterious Mr. Enter was trying to get off the ground and was going to pitch to the three major kids networks, Disney Channel, Nickelodeon, and Cartoon Network. But it never made it past the scripting stage, and there's a reason why it never made it past the scripting stage, and that's because it's not very good. Now, I read a dozen scripts in preparation for this episode. Yes, a baker's dozen, 12, as in there was more than one. And, well, it definitely had the potential to be something great. Just the overlying problems that exist in this series really killed any potential that might have had. Now, I'm going to outline those problems to you right now. Now, the first problem I have with it is that the premise is just downright awful. Now, it centers around kids being able to turn into adults and adults being able to turn into kids, which is just a really odd and bizarre concept, almost Sonic Chew-esque. Now, don't get me wrong, it is nowhere near as bad as Sonic Chew is, but considering the concept, even though it's very unique, is just incredibly bizarre and just not very good. That's what it kind of reminded me of, is Sonic Chew. And honestly, I think if it were explained a little bit better, or if it were just simplified, I think the concept could really work, because it is a very unique concept. It's kind of like an animated version of Freaky Friday, if anyone's ever seen that movie. But it's never explained how kids can turn into adults and how adults can turn into kids. So it's just a confusing, convoluted mess, and I highly doubt the target audience that it was trying to reach, aka kids, would understand it. And if you can't get your target audience to understand your premise, then that's not very good. I mean, I'm 21 years old, I keep up with internet culture on a daily basis, and I could barely understand it, so yeah. Okay, the second problem that I had is that the tone is all over the place. It doesn't know whether it wants to be fun, silly, and over the top like Ren and Stimpy or SpongeBob, or it wants to be serious and mature like Steven Universe or Adventure Time. So it leads to all these inconsistent tonal shifts. The tone is all over the place. Some scripts that I read were serious, mature, and just downright depressing, and it was trying to really insert Mr. Enter's world-famous morals into the equation. Whereas other scripts that I read were more comedic-based and were trying to be fun, silly, zany, over the top, you know, like a lot of animated series are today. And look, there's not a problem with an animated series trying to do both and trying to strike a balance, but if you're going to do one, just pick a tone and then just stick with it. Like, don't just constantly shift from tone to tone, because then you're going to suffer from an identity crisis, and then you never know what it's going to be. It's just going to be this incoherent, jumbled mess of ideas, and that's really what it is. It's just a jumbled mesh of inconsistent tones, so, you know, you can never really expect any consistency from, you know, the series. And the third problem that I have is really the humor. The humor is, oh god, the humor is just not great. Like I said before, Mr. Enter is not a very funny person. He's more of a serious and analytical one, and that really shows when you read these scripts. So whenever he tries to be funny, it just falls flat on its face. It just is cringeworthy because he doesn't know how to construct a joke and finish that joke. He's not very good at punchlines. There's literally one joke in one of the scripts that I read, which is a Pokemon parody, and it says, gotta catch those Snatchamons, or something like that. I'm not kidding. Look, while I appreciate him trying to insert some humor in there, the humor that it does have just doesn't work. It just comes off as incredibly forced and really cringeworthy. I mean, Snatchamon? Really, Mr. Enter? You know, it's just... I mean... You know, when you have somebody that's not a funny person trying to be funny, the results are just not very good. And finally, the final problem that I really have with it is that the characters are not developed. Seriously, the characters are completely indistinguishable from one another. I couldn't tell Linda and Robert apart from Sally and Timmy. Yeah, the characters, they're not developed. There's a distinct lack of character development. So you don't care what happens to these characters. You don't care about their plight or anything that happens to them. And in an animated series, or really any television series for that matter, it lives and dies by its characters. So if you don't care about the characters, if you don't care about anything that happens to them, that's a big problem. You don't get to know anything about them. You don't get to know their idiosyncrasies. You don't get to know what makes them tick. They're just essentially blank slates that you insert that are being inserted from script to script. So, you know, you don't get to know anything about them. And since they rapidly shift from adults to kids and back and forth, they're not really even characters. They're just there to serve a purpose, to ride along with these lackluster scripts. And it's incredibly disappointing. And you think for an internet critic, especially one that's been doing it for as long as the mysterious Mr. Enter, you would know a thing or two about character development, but apparently not. In conclusion, it had potential, and I understand that he was really trying to pour in a lot of effort into making something good, but all of the problems that I listed really killed that potential. And it's unfortunate because it really could have been something great if those problems were just ironed out. And I can see why the major kids networks didn't pick it up. And I can see why it didn't make it past the scripting stage. And honestly, if I was an executive for one of these major kids networks, I wouldn't want to pick it up because everything about it is just unappealing. The characters don't work, the humor falls flat, and the concept is just bizarre and just downright awful. You know, and honestly, I wouldn't suggest you reading it, to be honest with you, but if you're curious and you really want to do it, just go on DeviantArt and type in Growing Red. I'm pretty sure you'll be able to find it somewhere. It's not that hard to find, and hey, if you're curious, view it for yourself. But anyways, that's all I gotta say. This is ThatKidDouglas, aka the End Hero, signing out. Deuces, stay frosty and keep it weird. Cue an outro sequence now. iCarly was a live-action sitcom created by Dan Schneider that aired on Nickelodeon from 2007 to 2012, and it centered around a girl named Carly who created her own web series, of course titled iCarly. Alright, smarty pants, then who's the next episode really about? Justine? Who the hell is that? What the hell does she do? Oh, she's a YouTube celebrity. Well, I've covered a few of them before, so this should be pretty manageable. 4th of July fireworks and a chick who loves Apple products. Alright, I'm ready. Let's do this.